A series of reports this year about several conservative Supreme Court justices accepting free trips and failing to disclose them has prompted renewed efforts by Senate Democrats to implement a code of ethics for the High Court. Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee intend to subpoena Republican megadonor Harlan and conservative legal activist Leonard as part of their investigation. A planned vote on those subpoenas was postponed today. Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island chairs the Subcommittee on Federal Courts, and he joins us now. Welcome to the NewsHour.
Good to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
So as we mentioned, the committee was expected to vote on those two subpoenas today, but hit a roadblock. What happened?
The Republicans are desperate not to have to vote on this. And so last night, they filed nearly 90 amendments. And that meant that all of our members had to review overnight 90 separate amendments, all of them intended to be poisonous, and try to figure out what our joint response was going to be. In effect, they jammed the gears of the committee with an avalanche of bad faith amendments, and so that stopped things today. But the resolve of the committee to vote out the subpoenas is fixed and firm. And, it's just a matter of rescheduling. And now that we know that that's the strategy, we can prepare for it.
Well, what information are you seeking with these subpoenas to Mr. Crow and Mr. Leo? Does the investigation extend beyond what you see as a need to implement a code of ethics? And the reason I ask the question is because I've watched your Senate floor speeches, the series called The Scheme, and you seem to allude to underlying tax crimes. What's your theory of the case?
First of all, we need to know what all these conservative justices have been receiving. ProPublica and other news reports have done a very good job of bringing out some things, but it's not clear that we know all of it. We also need to develop information about how systemic this was. This isn't just a random gift here and a random gift there. It's always the same individuals, the same front groups. There's a network effect here that we need to understand. And then the Finance Committee separately is looking at the tax side for several reasons. First of all, were these gifts declared as income if they should have been? And if the donor declared them as a business expense, how do you get away with claiming that it's personal hospitality? And if it's a gift, there are also gift tax considerations once you get over $17,000. So it looks like the reporting failures aren't just violations of the disclosure laws. They may also be violations of the tax laws.
On this matter of Justice Thomas accepting gifts and luxury trips, what do you say to those who might make the argument Harlan can spend his money however he sees fit? And if Justice Thomas is eating, canopies off the back of Harlan mega yacht, whether he does that or not, it's not going to change the fact that he is a conservative vote and voice on the Supreme Court.
The issue is probably not Harlan I don't see that Harlan is in trouble for any of this, unless false statements were filed of some kind, but we have no indication of that. The problem is on the court side. Supreme Court justices, like other judges, have an obligation to file disclosures that show what gifts and emoluments and so forth they have received. And that legal obligation, a law passed by Congress, is implemented by the Judicial Conference, a body created by Congress for that purpose, among others. So we need to look into whether those laws are being properly implemented by the Judicial Conference should these big gifts have been disclosed, and how do the arguments that they didn't need to be disclosed fare when shown to the light of day. And my contention is the arguments fare terribly when shown to the light of day. The gifts should have been disclosed, and potentially because of the systematic nature of these gifts and the repeated nature of these gifts, there may be a good deal more to this than just come on my yacht and have a nice afternoon.
So you're saying that Congress does have a role here, because Justice Alito, as I'm sure you know, says that Congress does not have the authority to implement a code of ethics on the Supreme Court. Says there's nothing in the Constitution that calls for it.
Yeah, that was weird.
In what ways?
Well, it was weird in several ways. First, it was weird in that he's wrong. Second, it was weird in that he offered it as an opinion in the Wall Street Journal editorial page, as opposed to in a Supreme Court opinion. And we're told every time they come before us, oh, we couldn't possibly comment on that, Senator, because we're not allowed to offer opinions on matters that might come before the court. Here's a matter headed for the court, and he offered an opinion on it. And the sort of final salvo here is that when there have been previous episodes of potentially improper gifts, those issues have been referred to the Judicial Conference under the disclosure laws. And the Supreme Court has never objected to it. When Harlan Crow gave his first round of yacht and jet travel gifts to Justice Thomas, that question was referred to the Judicial Conference and addressed under these disclosure laws. So to say that we have no role here is in flat conflict with the facts and the history of what has already taken place in similar matters with the Supreme Court's full consent.
You and Senator Durbin, who now chairs the Judiciary Committee, have been calling for an enforceable code of conduct for more than 10 years. There was a letter that was issued 11 years ago. And we know, just based on public reporting and public comments, that Justices Kagan, Kavanaugh, and Coney Barrett have publicly voiced support.
Yep.
So what's the holdup?
I think the holdup is probably Thomas and Alito, who seem to be the ones with their hands furthest in the cookie jar, who probably don't want any further inquiry into that, and who seem to be liking billionaire-funded lifestyles of the rich and famous.
There are Republicans who say this entire effort, this entire enterprise is aimed at defanging the Supreme Court's conservative supermajority as it moves jurisprudence to the right. What do you say to that?
Well, I think they're wrong. First of all, you mentioned the letter that began 11 years ago before this had taken place, so the timing doesn't work. Second, set all the drama aside and all the noise. What you have is billionaires with a demonstrated pattern of trying to influence the Supreme Court through a whole variety of groups by giving donations and participating, who are at the same time also giving enormous, massive secret gifts to justices. Just on its face, that merits investigation. And if it happened in any other court in the United States, it would have been investigated. There would have been fact-finding, and there would have been a result and consequences. It's only the Supreme Court that is living outside the bounds of the rules. And if they were not living outside of the bounds of the rules, then we'd have probably a separate fight over the merits of the decisions that they're making. But that doesn't change the fact that they're operating right now, some of them, outside of the rules.
In the time that remains, I want to get your reaction to West Virginia Democratic Senator Joe Manchin announcing today that he's not running for re-election in 2024. At a minimum, it's going to be difficult, if not impossible, for Democrats to hold on to that seat in deep red West Virginia.
Yeah, I think that probably puts an extra seat on the table for Mitch McConnell, and that means we have to fight particularly hard to win in Texas and defeat Ted Cruz.
Is that possible?
And it seems so. We were very close last time, and I think we've got a very, very good candidate in Colin Allred, a good Texan football star, local hero, very talented member of Congress. So I think that's good, and we also just, puts extra pressure on us to make sure we hold the other Democratic seats.
Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island.
Good to be with you.
Thanks so much for coming in.